All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this special event. I think we're good to go, right? All systems are go for this special event. So my name is Claus Hetting, and I'm the CEO and Chairman of WiFi Now. And first of all, to all our viewers out there, thank you for tuning in. We're super excited about this, our new series of webinars. We call them industry updates. And our current ambition is actually to bring you at least one of these per month on the hottest topics in Wi-Fi, of course. And we already have a couple more in the pipeline for you. So keep an eye out for all of them. They are a great way to keep fully updated of what is going on across the industry. They are available not only live, but also on demand. In case you missed the live version, you can simply go to our event listings page, should be easy to find, and register to watch any of our previous industry updates. There's already some really good ones in there. So today, this program is all about campus network as a service, or campus NaaS. And this is a fairly recent trend, I think it's fair to say, in enterprise networking and Wi-Fi. And I think an exciting one, because it involves not just a new business model, of course, but also a lot of innovation. And so you're going to hear from many of the finest NaaS providers right here on the program today. And of course, the big questions are, first of all, what is campus NaaS? So somebody's going to explain that to us. I think it's probably going to be Roy. And secondly, can campus NaaS providers bite a sizable chunk out of the multi-billion-dollar enterprise Wi-Fi networking market? That's a really big question. In other words, can they be perhaps disruptive even? So hopefully we'll get a little closer to answering those questions on the program today. So meanwhile, don't forget, one of the reasons why we broadcast these things live is so that you get a chance to ask questions, and you can also comment. Feel free to use the chat box below the viewer window, and we will try to get to all of your questions, especially towards the end of the program during the Q&A when we bring all our speakers back. So second announcement, very quickly, very important. We're taking the Wi-Fi World Congress to Geneva, Switzerland, this September 23rd to 25th. It's about 6 weeks away. And so this is your chance to mingle and network with the world's absolute Wi-Fi leaders. By the way, Bob Grosz from WorldVue is going to be there. He's on the show here today as well. Geneva, by the way, great place to visit. So here's your chance. And if you're interested in a starring role on stage or as part of our exhibition, there are still a few options left. And you can ping me if you're interested in that, and we'll get you sorted. So that's it. Let me start by introducing our guests and presenters today. And here they are. First of all, my good friend and co-organizer of this webinar, Mr. Roy Chua. And Roy, there he is. Roy is founder and principal of AvidThink. And Roy is also the author of a new industry report on campus NaaS. Welcome, Roy. Good to see you.
Thanks, Klaus. Always a pleasure. Good to see you too.
And by the way, thank you also for taking the initiative on this webinar. I think it's a great idea also because, of course, you've written the report and people can download it. There is a link in the text below. Second, we have today with us Jayesh Patel. Jayesh is VP of Business Development at one of the leading new NaaS providers, Join Digital. Welcome, Jayesh.
Hello, and nice to meet everyone and participate in today's session. Thank you.
Great to see you. Thanks for coming on. So from Ramen, we've got Partho Mishra. Partho is founder and CEO of Ramen. There he is. Welcome, Partho. And he's coming to us from a hotel in, I'm going to say New Hampshire, is it?
Exactly. Somewhere on the New Hampshire-Vermont border. I'm not sure where, but right, good to see you too.
All right. Well, we're super happy you could join us despite the fact that you're traveling, and we appreciate it. Thank you, Partho, and welcome. And last but not least, Mr. Tim Dyer. Tim is VP of Global Service Provider Sales and Market Development at CommScope Ruckus. Welcome, Tim. Good to have you.
Thanks so much, Klaus. Thanks for having me.
Great. And we're going to get to lots of presentations. By the way, we should also introduce, we forgot one person because he's not presenting, but he's obviously here as well. That is Mr. Bob Grosz, or Robert Grosz from WorldVue. Bob is, Bob is President and COO, correct, Bob?
Correct.
There he is. Sorry, I nearly missed you because I didn't have you in my script. I'm sorry about that. But it's good to have you, Bob. Thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay, so let's start with the presentations, and we're going to start with Roy. and Roy is the author of a brand new report, and that's right. So we're just going to put you up there and get your presentation going. There you are. There you are, Roy. Sorry for the delays, and we're going to put your presentation up there and have you go ahead and tell us about what your findings in the new report, right?
Yep, excellent. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, we encourage you to download the report that has all the details in there. But I thought I'd take a couple of minutes today, before we end up with the presentations from the various vendors and folks here, which I'm looking forward to, and the panel discussion that I'm looking forward to as well. So yeah, we recently put out a campus network as a service report out there, and it's been quite well received. And as you said, Klaus, earlier, this is a pretty big market. I mean, sort of campus NaaS market, best guess is it's like a $35 billion market in the overall sort of total available market in 2023. So it was in 2023 and, probably still growing in 2024. So, and we show where those numbers come from. So it's sizable. It's potentially very sizable. And so there is a question as to, why NaaS and why now? So let's take a look at some of the drivers on the next slide here, in terms of why this interest in campus as network as a service. And I know you, Klaus, you said, yeah, it's a recent thing. It is a relatively recent thing, and it's been a couple of years in the making. And even the large vendors have been inching towards it, obviously. So I think we start on the demand side, right? And one of the things that we know on the network side is there's a lot of complexity, and enterprises are struggling with this whole complexity of network management, all the different vendor offerings out there, and they want someone to take that complexity away from them. And part of it too is that familiarity with SaaS, right? They have SaaS and IaaS and platform as a service and PaaS, and they said, well, if we could do it with computing and we had success there, why can't we do it in networking as well? If we can do it in computing, we should be able to do it, and storage. Why can't we do it in networking? The other element too is that they're getting used to cloud management for a lot of systems, and they're saying, well, I should be able to manage my network, from the cloud. And I mean, previously there wasn't that familiarity, there wasn't that openness to it, and now there certainly is. And the other element is, money is tight, and it's no longer zero interest rate, the world that we live in today. And so, companies are saying, look, can we find a way to save money and to focus on the core and not, deal with things that we're not really good at. And so there's this OpEx good, CapEx bad mindset, and there's a growing preferences on the demand side, to do that. And then finally, IT staff shortage. We've all heard, from a lot of different companies out there, the difficulty in recruiting and retaining skilled labor, right? And so that's the demands. On the supply side, subscriptions are in vogue. A lot of financial markets, a lot of investors like the predictable revenue, right? And so they reward that. And so that's one of those elements. And then cloud management and automation, because it's advancements in those areas, NaaS is a lot more feasible and cost effective than it was previously. And that tied in with the ability to do analytics and to provide more efficient network operations and even sort of predictive maintenance. I think, you can bring more value to your customers that way. And the other element around campus NaaS is that we've built, Wi-Fi and, LAN networks for many years. And there's a lot of mature deployment tips and tricks that we know. To the extent that you can codify that and make it available as part of an offering, that sort of helps everyone. So I think we're seeing that as well. A couple of other elements, there's this disaggregated stack movement and open source, right? We've got open LAN, open Wi-Fi. Some of these technologies are opening the way for new NaaS providers to come into the market and leverage those. So it's a lower cost of market entry. And then finally, security and networking convergence. We're seeing that there's a trend towards integrating security with networking, creates new opportunities, especially for the NaaS offering. So let's move on to the next slide, which is what is NaaS? And I think Klaus asked that early on. And well, obviously, definitions differ. There's no canonical definition of NaaS per se. It's kind of what the vendor tells you it is. But the reality is there are a couple of elements that are quite common, right? Number one is, generally speaking, there is a consumption pricing component to it. And so, sort of pay as you go is an element of it. And then many NaaSes have a low CapEx as well. And there's usually some kind of short-term, relatively speaking, contract, right? Sometimes it comes with that. And so some of these sort of basic elements are there, right? Sort of proactive monitoring, partially managed, so quick provisioning. So those are sort of table stakes. And then there are the differentiators where some will argue that, well, it's not NaaS unless it's all inclusive, right? It's got to have software and hardware and maintenance all in one price, and monthly. And some are saying, well, it's not NaaS unless it's zero capex, right? Although some customers saying, wait, we want to pay some money up front because the budget's there, and if we don't use it, it's gone. So you need some flexibility. But some of the NaaS providers are going out there and saying, you know what, you pay me outcome-based SLAs. Don't meet the SLAs, you get a discount. And in some cases, they're saying, you know what, we'll fully manage it. We'll take over the network for you, and that's an offering. And some of them are saying, we'll take over the network for you. You don't have a choice, which doesn't sit well with everyone. So there's all these variations out there in the NaaS market. And I think the reality is I don't think there is sort of one size fits all. I think, different companies of different sizes have different needs, and, then they've come through different paths in terms of the networks that they have today. And so I think the reality is we will see some diversity in NaaS, but I think the table stakes are going to be relatively common across all the providers out there. All right, let's move on to the next slide now. So I think NaaS is great, but it's, again, there's always barriers, right? There's resistance. And one is obviously fear of vendor lock-in. I mean, that's the thing, right? Go NaaS, now this vendor controls all your networks, all your campus networks throughout the nation, maybe worldwide. Should I be worried? Well, maybe, right? So they're worried about that over dependence, and yet they complain they can't recruit and they want someone to take the complexity away from them, but it can't be just one vendor, but it has to be one vendor, right? So that they're sort of battling that in their minds. And the other one is cultural resistance, self-preservation. So sometimes some of the NaaS vendors sell to the network engineers and say, it's co-managed, so don't worry about your job. Some of the NaaS vendors will sell to their bosses and say, you don't need network engineers, you can redeploy them or don't hire them, right? So it depends on how you pitch it. But most of the time I'm seeing the gentler approach. Not all cases, they're saying co-manage first, make your life better. We're not taking away your jobs, right? So we see those barriers. And there's security and privacy concerns, right? If you're running, say, a fintech business, or you're running an insurance business, you have this third-party provider coming in and managing your network, and with the potential ability to see everything in the network, unless you architect it a little differently and have strict controls, do you really want that? Are you really open to that? And then there are other, barriers that we see. Integration overhead. There's some legacy assets out there that can't easily be managed, or the NaaS vendor refuses to take on because it adds complexity and they can't make money doing it. So they resist. They actually decide not to take on those customers. There's also SLA ambiguity. What's outcome-based mean, right? Well, when are you going to update my Wi-Fi 6 to Wi-Fi 7? Well, is it part of the SLA, right? So what are you contracted, for an SLO and SLA? What is it really? What am I getting, right? So there's this ambiguity in the early days, but again, I suspect that will be ironed out over time. And in some cases, there are technical limitations. There are some devices or environments that the NaaS providers can't support. And I don't think it's fair to ask the early NaaS vendors and the guys to support 100% of environments. Realistically, if they can support 60 or 70%, I think that makes sense. And there may be 30%, 20%, or even 10% in the long term that may never be supported by a NaaS vendor, and it has to be a special case, right? So I think that's what we see in terms of barriers. And then moving on to the next slide for opportunities, right? So the NaaS vendors, there's opportunities for NaaS vendors as they come along. There's new ways, given that is a as-a-service model, to provide innovation, to provide value to the customer. And so we're seeing a lot of them add AI-powered services, automation, orchestration, helps the vendor, helps the customer, right? Adding more security features so that you have this integrated converged solution. Seeing that very, very popular, right? Let's add a little bit of SASE type stuff to your NaaS, or zero trust to your NaaS, right? And you save money, you get the value, seeing that. And then predictive analytics. Let's do capacity management for you. Let's suggest adding APs or upgrading your APs before you actually need them. Or we're seeing, your SLAs drop or your QoS drop. Proactively suggesting those things. And then some of the NaaS vendors are going to the WAN to say, yeah, not only will we support all your various campuses and your remote offices, we will help you with your WAN. And while we're helping you with your WAN, let's add a little bit of SD-WAN. And you pay us more money, but you have less complexity, less headaches, but we make more money. And so there's this competition that we're seeing between the WAN and the LAN, and one wants to eat one way and the other one wants to eat the other way. It's going to be fun, right? And also seeing integration of IoT and private 5G. So it's not just about Wi-Fi anymore. It's like, I will solve your campus connectivity problems, and I will give you a converged offering, and I will manage it. Whether you need Wi-Fi, or maybe in some situations you believe that, CBRS, band 48, private 5G, whatever it is, solves your problem better or is more efficient from a coverage perspective, we will help you with that. So you're seeing some of the vendors actually cover that, and I'm sure we'll be talking about that a little bit today. And then finally, adding more sort of app user-centric services, seeing some of these NaaS vendors provide more visibility, more QoS, app-aware QoS, or app-aware QoE, quality of experience capabilities to the offerings, because they can see a lot of analytics. In some cases, if they have the WAN as well, they can optimize the experience for the users within the campuses. And some of them are looking to expand that sort of NaaS offerings in the branch offices as well. So that's what we're seeing in terms of the NaaS market. Very dynamic, a lot of changes. And so let's wrap up on the next slide here, right? So the key takeaways, I would say, campus NaaS is an evolving market. It's a lot of potential. Again, like I said, 35 billion available. I mean, that's going to take some time for NaaS, and who knows whether NaaS is the right business model long-term, but certainly there's a lot of interest that we're seeing out there. And there's a lot of benefits to a lot of enterprises in adopting NaaS. And I think, fundamentally it comes down to whether the vendors can meet the needs of enough customers to grow that pipeline, to grow the market over time. But it looks pretty promising. And so in the meantime, if you have questions, hopefully, download the report and check it out. So thanks.
Yeah, I think there's a link below the viewer window where you can download the report. By the way, it's free, of course, and I think you just registered to download, right, Roy?
Yep.
Great job in analyzing this for us, and I really like the way that you did that. So, to me, the innovation side of things is really big. It's not just a new business model. It's really a place where new companies, including some of the ones that we have on the show today, can really add value with new services. I mean, would you say that it might be? I mean, I suppose that if once the NaaS network is in place, is it a little easier maybe on top of the infrastructure that is in place to offer, if the architecture is right and so on, to offer new services on top of that? Is that part of the NaaS model, do you think?
It is. And I'm seeing that happening with a lot of the vendors. They say, let's come and just give you, Wi-Fi and, Ethernet switching, right? And then they're like,
Yes.
let's a little bit of Zero Trust and SASE. Like, let's give you DNS security. Let's give you, and it's all just subscription, right? You just check the box
Correct.
and say, yes.
Correct.
And so that's actually quite convenient, right? It's kind of like adding features to your app on a SaaS perspective. It's the same thing. So I'm seeing that. And companies seem to be okay with that. At least the ones that are adopting NaaS. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Super cool. It's very compelling, I think, from that point of view. And thank you so much for that presentation. We're going to bring you back for the Q&A towards the end of the program. In the meantime, we will put up Jayesh from Join Digital, of course. And Join Digital is one of, I think, the most significant, I think it's fair to say, one of the most important providers of these types of services. So Jayesh, first of all, welcome, and it's great to have you here. We're going to put up your presentation. There it is, and feel free to go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you, Claus and Roy. Appreciate the introduction, and Roy for covering the NaaS industry coverage. So what I want to do a little bit today is talk about the company and as well as the technology and how Join delivers these services. So let's move on to the next slide. So Join, we are a technology company based in Silicon Valley. What we do is we deliver a more radically simplified and cost-effective cloud-first network as a service for enterprise, campus, branch, commercial building owners, as well as industrial sites. So that's we cover a full gamut of customer segments. We have a pretty extensive footprint. We are in 28 cities in 5 countries with over 160 buildings covering 115 million square feet with our network services. So that's quite a large footprint. And over the years, we've actually learned a lot about how to manage, operate, and serve these customers. And we've got a mix of, as I say, both the building owner customers as well as enterprise. On the building owner side, I mean, some of the large names you might have heard of, like Boston Properties, Invesco, Beacon, Oxford, as well as Obayashi, a large construction company in Japan. We serve a lot of their buildings in Japan as well. And then on the enterprise side, we've got a host of both Fortune 1000 customers as well as mid-market, including the likes of Oracle, ServiceNow, Mercedes-Benz, BitSight, and a few others, a name that you might recognize. And one of the key things we are seeing in the NaaS model is that as we deploy with some of these large enterprise customers, they start up, initially we deploy a distributed branch office or something like that, or a small location, and they immediately see the benefits, and then we start expanding into more and more of their footprints. So we are definitely seeing an increase in the value and the take-up of this type of service. Next slide. So here I want to talk to you a little bit about our solution and in terms of particularly for enterprise networking, right? So when we talk about our network as a service, we have 4 critical components, right? It starts with our joint technology stack that comprises of our own network hardware, our own software, and more importantly, we have got an extensible data engine to collect all the various elements of the data within the network, so we can then leverage our integrated AI and ML capabilities, right? And this is key, and I'll talk about it a little bit more in terms of providing this next generation of network services. With that, we also have a dedicated joint service team for network design, installation, configuration, security, and software upgrade. So it's a comprehensive team that is a combination of the building technology and then operating the technology. We then couple this with a fully managed state-of-the-art AI-driven global network operations center that efficiently runs and operates those networks. And as Roy mentioned, then we also deliver additional capabilities and enhanced services for our customers. So typically when you're in a branch location, I mean, today with collaboration, you need to instantly turn on audio-visual collaboration services, voice or IP, printers, as well as other services, including IoT integration, right? So what you don't want is the IT team saying, okay, I've now outsourced some of this to a NaaS provider, but I'm still managing the AV system, which doesn't really help them scale. So we provide all of that. And ultimately, to sum it up, we have an end-to-end delivery, service delivery model that starts with actual architecture and design of the solutions we deploy for the network. We then deploy, install everything. We also manage the internet and WAN connectivity to ensure end-to-end cloud performance. And this is all under a highly secure and compliance framework that we apply. And then it's managed through our AI-powered network operations center. So it's fully managed and operated for the thing. So it's a complete end-to-end packaging of the service. And I think that's important as you look at different providers of this network as a service. You need to understand what are the elements they provide and what they don't, because ultimately what we find is the businesses they don't want to solve a partial problem. They want to solve a complete problem when they say, okay, we are now using network as a service. Next slide. Here, I'm actually going to talk about some typical pain points and challenges we see with our enterprise customers that we are addressing. The first one starts with spotty Wi-Fi coverage. Today, everybody knows that Wi-Fi is the ubiquitous connectivity mechanism for most users and employees in a company, right? So what we do is that we focus on ensuring excellent Wi-Fi coverage and optimize in real-time radio frequencies to ensure peak performance so that people don't get the spotty Wi-Fi coverage issues. We then complement that with taking over and deploying, in many cases, the internet and WAN connectivity. This way, we can actually improve the end-to-end application performance. As I say, there's no point in having a high-performance LAN network when your bottleneck is the WAN, or the other way around, right? Or the bottleneck is Wi-Fi. We make sure that all of these elements are performing at the highest level so that the end users experience have a great experience. And as Roy mentioned, I think security is so important. So we always start with implementing a zero trust security framework that includes user authentication, least privileged access, and continuous monitoring of the network, right? So we want to ensure that this network is highly secure and addresses all the enterprise concerns. Then the other thing we see is that a lot of IT staff, their challenge is, look, I've got a Meraki access point, and I've got a Fortinet firewall, and I've got another vendor switches, and troubleshooting becomes problematic for them. So it's not about giving them pretty dashboards. What we do is our own network operating center does the monitoring. We use, powered by advanced AI, to really isolate problems quickly, troubleshoot them, and in most cases proactively address them, and then also automatically enhance network performance. And this is some of the key values that our customers are seeing when we provide our service. Furthermore, what you want to make sure is this service is future-proof. So what we do is we guarantee hardware and software upgrades to the life of the service, so they maintain a state-of-the-art infrastructure. For example, as I say, we provide, we maintain that if a Wi-Fi standard changes, we'll upgrade your infrastructure so that it meets the latest standards within Wi-Fi, so you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about buying the latest technology and then worrying about implementing it in the network. And all of this is packaged as a subscription model that minimizes risk, as well as lowers the CapEx, while providing financial predictability and reduce operational costs. So as I say, it's like the pricing is very transparent on smaller deployments, per user basis. So you're not, it's very easy for the finance team to understand the pricing models and for them to use that in their financial modeling as well. Next slide. One of the things I want to talk about here is a couple of examples of our large-scale enterprise deployments. And I think these are important to showcase the type of how NaaS is really being deployed in much larger scale than some people might think. So the first example here is a property in Houston. It's a large commercial building with 650,000 square feet. This is a large-scale office environment. We deployed a fully converged network that supports all the mission-critical IT systems within the building. This is a turnkey, and then we provide on top of that turnkey IT services tenants that can be turned up within days rather than the typical months. So the tenants can move in the building and they're productive right away. And we have achieved significant, the building owner achieved significant efficiencies. It minimized the time and effort to troubleshoot operational issues, leading to streamlined processes. And just to give an example, apart from all the benefits they saw, in this particular case, they saw a reduction by 30% of their operating cost for the network, and that's significant. The second example I want to show is talk about is the large-scale multi-site deployment in Japan. This is where we provide Wi-Fi and LAN services spanning nearly 400,000 square feet across 40 floors in 2 towers, right? In this scenario, the network supporting 2,500 employees with secure enterprise connectivity, guest Wi-Fi, as well as IoT devices, and supporting their AV systems and printers as well. And here we also combine advanced IT infrastructure, including network security with high availability firewalls, URL whitelisting, and redundancy through multiple WAN connectivity to ensure robust security and reliability. And what's interesting about this particular deployment was we did this a full upgrade of an existing network without disrupting the end users. So it was ensuring zero downtime for the workforce and seamless transition to the new system. So this also was very important for a lot of customers with that, because there's a lot of infrastructure out there that is in need for upgrades, and how do you do this without impacting users? And because of the benefits, I mean, this particular client obviously saw the benefits, and we even expanded to all their satellite branch offices, where we took over the management of their smaller offices as well, which less than 200 employees. So hopefully these two examples give the type of scale of some of these NaaS deployments and the acceptance level and the value that the customers see. Next slide. So in conclusion, I want to talk about two things here, or highlight a couple of things. One is that we are more outcome focused when we talk outcome focused as it relates to the business for an enterprise, right? So it's not about talking about the individual feeds and speeds of network elements. That's what a traditional vendor does. Like my AP has 4 radios and 6 MIMOs and all that. It's not about that. It's about the user experience. And so what we focus on is how we continuously, what we are doing is providing you a highly reliable network with high performance for the end users, so the IT teams don't have to continually invest in this new technology and invest in a lot of IT teams. The second thing I want to just talk about now is how we provide this enterprise scale NaaS. So Join has been a leader in cloudifying LAN since 2018 in terms of delivering scalable, reliable, automated networks. So we're not, although the word NaaS has been talked about recently, we have actually been doing that since 2018. And as I say, we start off with our fully integrated end-to-end solution. This is, as I say, the holistic approach of combining hardware, software, monitoring tools, AI management, all into a single package. Then we apply advanced network operations AI capabilities into our service, so that's how we can do the proactive detection and resolution of network and security issues, as well as ensuring maximum performance availability of the network. Thirdly, the zero trust network security framework is very critical. So it is really embedded into our design, where we actually work with multiple partners for advanced security services, so that you have continuous oversight of the network activity, anomaly detection, and we do all of this to ensure full protection of the network. And finally, it's all about the predictable pricing model, as we discussed before, because it's transparent and there are no hidden costs, so that it's very clear to the IT team over time what is going to cost, and the finance team, what's going to cost for the service. So finally, as I say, it's all about making the IT team's job easier, reduce cost, and enable the IT teams to focus on their other business drivers instead of running and managing and operating it. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Great presentation, Jayesh. Yeah, super impressive. And those two cases that you showed were actually very large, right? Companies that you're providing the service for. And I was not aware of the size of these things. So I'm super impressed. But I wanted to ask you, is that typical? Is that the sweet spot for what you do? Is pretty much the bigger, the better? Is the benefit of what you do more, the larger the case, so to speak, do you think?
So it goes across the board. We've got a large set of small and mid-market customers as well, right? And I think you've got to look at it in different terms. So there are customers that might have a large enterprise customer might have small remote offices, but then only have 50 users or 20 users. So those are the smaller deployments, right? But they're also important for them, because typically that's the one they start off as a low-hanging fruit of saying, let's start testing the model out, and then they deploy us in the larger facilities. I think the reason for showing some of the larger deployments is the fact that we can scale up to the very large, and as customers see the value, they're giving us even the larger opportunities. So we've got a mix of all sorts of businesses, and the good thing with NaaS is that, say, at least in our case, we can scale from the small to the very large.
Right, and in your case, you started by introducing quite a lot of different types of companies. So you're not specialized into any vertical, obviously, but it did look a little bit like the carpeted enterprise is mostly what you're focusing on, or is that not fair to say?
So you're right. Currently most of the deployments are carpeted offices, but over the last year or so, we have seen more increase in other areas, including industrial and other sites, because once again, everybody is seeing the same problem. So we've got a couple of large projects in the works that are all more industrial, right, and rather than just carpeted offices. And
in terms of the service itself, can you slice it in a different way in case a client wants it in a different way? In terms of, is it 100% management on your side, or can you hand over some of the management to the client if they prefer that? I imagine you can, right?
Yeah, we can slice it, but the model that I think we're going to see more and more, and we're already doing with some customers, is things whereby we have multiple entry points where we can enter in a brownfield where we take over the existing site and over time enhance it to a NaaS model, so cap and grow models and things like that. And so once again, I think if you look at a customer's journey, I could be in a corporate enterprise that hasn't done any of that's done everything in house. What are my options? And what we want to do is provide multiple ways for them to start the journey through a NaaS.
Yeah. I mean, above all, this seems to me that for something like this, and I guess generally for NaaS, it really requires an incredibly sophisticated view and experience with operations, right? I mean, apart from actually providing the network, of course, you have to have the technology, but operational processes and so forth, right?
Yeah, you're hitting a very important point. By us supporting a lot of these networks, we have a lot of large data set of what are typical traffic patterns, usage patterns, and the experience of managing different types of customers. And that's really important because that's how you can quickly identify problems and proactively troubleshoot things. Yeah. So you're absolutely correct. It's not simply about just saying, here's the network technology elements. It's about the experience with our NOC and our AI tools that helps in solve this.
Jayesh, it's great to have you. Thank you so much. We're going to bring you back at the end after the other presentations for some more discussions. Thank you so much for now. And so our next presenter is from Ramen, and his name is Partho Mishra, and he's coming to us from New Hampshire. Thank you, Partho, for coming on and taking the time. It's great to have you. And I think I think it's fair to say you have quite a different approach to NaaS at Ramen. So I'm going to let you present and show everybody how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, I mean, our tagline is we provide a NaaS solution for the uncarpeted enterprise. And if you go to the next slide, essentially, we are covering campuses, but these are a very different type of campus than maybe what the earlier speakers were talking about. And this has been my life for the last 3 years. So kind of giant warehouses, smart factories, pretty much any work area where blue collar work is being done. And before I jump into technology, let me kind of try to capture the problems of this world. So the first, most obvious one is there's been extreme labor shortages, pretty much since the pandemic. Well, maybe the June jobs report kind of flipped a little bit, but it's astonishing. You pretty much any segment that you go into, it's very hard to find workers, and it's very hard to kind of train them and kind of get them up to speed and so on. So that's one of the things that the industry is dealing with. The second thing the industry is dealing with is obviously the supply chain and kind of how things were delivered to consumers was completely upended during the pandemic, and that's kind of almost revolutionized that world. I mean, starting with someone like Amazon, but then all the 3PLs followed, and the set of requirements there in terms of even just very simply delivery time and tracking and so on are quite mind-boggling. And then finally, from more of a CapEx perspective, there's this enormous investment that's happening in manufacturing around the world. I've highlighted American manufacturing, but this is really true around the world. And as a consequence, kind of what's happening is that the people that run these facilities are under the gun. They need to find some ways to solve these problems, to be much more efficient, to deal with the labor shortages and so on. And not surprisingly, therefore, they're looking at technology. Next slide. So, the term digital transformation has been around for, I don't know, like 50 years, and I actually hate it. But I thought I'd leave it up here just because it kind of captures a range of possibilities, right? So what we see going on is that in some of the most modern factories that we go into, no names here, but that whiteboard that you see there is actually real. It's being used today, and not in New Hampshire, in another location. But it's kind of symptomatic of what happens today in terms of the workflow. It's surprisingly still very archaic. Very kind of pen and paper. People write stuff down on clipboards. They walk to a shed, enter some stuff on a keyboard. Lots of errors. Lots of challenges. So I think the lowest step in this digital transformation hierarchy is just simply digitizing data flow. kind of, let's say if you wanted to track your assets, being able to scan barcodes and enter things into an ERP system, a database of some kind. So we see that happening kind of across the board. On the other end of the spectrum, if you walk into kind of a modern fulfillment centers, you don't see any people. You see AMRs and AGVs everywhere, right? Essentially, kind of robotic, kind of devices that are going around, picking and packing and doing all the activities. So what we see happening is that because of modern AI and the awareness around it, there's been a substantial amount of interest in upgrading these workflows, especially given the challenges that I talked about earlier. And even simply, if you just do like the transition from pen and paper to digital, the dollar savings, for let's say a mid-market enterprise with like a few $1 billion in revenue, is somewhere of the range of like easily in their first year, like 10 to 15 to $20 million per facility, per warehouse. So there's a great deal of interest in kind of pursuing and adopting these technologies. Next slide. Now, kind of stating the obvious, if you need to do any kind of digital automation, the baseline is all centered around data. You need to be able to capture data, whether it's coming in through sensors, whether it's being scanned by human beings, wherever it might come from. And as you go up that food chain, as you do more and more automation, obviously the devices that are kind of running around doing things. I mean, think of like the amount of data that's being generated by one of these Tesla cars, right? So there's an enormous need for not just connectivity, but robust connectivity that's available everywhere in the facility, in the campus. And we see this kind of across the board at all of our customers. And it's not just industrial sites like factories. It's also think like waste management facilities. Think like, essentially water treatment. Think of a lot of these, environments. You don't normally think of a landfill as being, kind of a high-tech site. But there's a need for this type of transformation in a lot of these environments. And the default, whenever we go into one of these environments, the default is almost always Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi wasn't, as we all know, originally designed with this in mind. And so not surprisingly, kind of the default solutions, which are often operated by the local IT teams with, kind of small kind of workforces, don't work very well. And that's kind of been our area of focus as Ramen. So if you could go to the next slide. So what we have attempted to do, and some of the pictures on the right-hand side, well, all of the pictures show you different types of campuses, ranging from something that's in the Rocky Mountains and is close to 1,000 acres to kind of large athletic facilities, huge warehouses, and so forth. And what we do for this environment is we offer a stack. The components aren't very surprising. This is what you would have guessed. We provide connectivity elements that sit on the customer premise. Unlike some of the other solutions, what we focused on doing right from the get-go is be wireless technology agnostic, meaning that we support Wi-Fi, we support private wireless. We'll use low power wireless technologies to connect up sensors. So we use whatever technology makes sense for the use case that it was designed for. Look, IEEE 802.11 spent like 30 years designing Wi-Fi to be extremely optimal for some use cases, and you have to use it for those. Likewise, 3GPP has done the same thing for private cellular or cellular technologies that are being used in private cellular. So we try to leverage the best of breed technologies. But the key thing is the cloud components that allow us, whether they are running on the public cloud or at the customer prem, to be able to not just offer reliable connectivity, secure connectivity, those are table stakes, but also the ability to be able to collect data and to visualize what's happening on the enterprise. Jayesh briefly talked about this as well. We find that to be enormously powerful, and our customers find it to be very useful. We won't spend much time talking about it in this presentation, but we think that one of the significant kind of advantages of NaaS is that ability to be able to pull together those views and to be able to do analysis on that. Next slide. Now, in terms of our offering, our whole goal has been to keep the process as simple as possible for the customer. So, our goal is, if we have a conversation with somebody and they have a problem at a facility, we should be in a position where 2 weeks from that conversation, we can walk into that facility and light it up in maybe a day, maybe two, right? It really depends, obviously, on the scale of the facility. So there's a tremendous amount of automation that's gone into every piece of it. I would highlight, particularly from an innovation standpoint, some of the things that we do with, for example, site surveys and so forth, both outdoors and indoors, are very kind of, sort of radical in terms of what we're able to do. And it's very important for us because, the cornerstone of our service is an SLA, which kind of, calls out a very high level of reliability. And then we back that up with commercial guarantees for the customer. Much of what you see in this flow today is something that traditional service provider like an AT&T or a Verizon would do, but this flow might take months to put in place. And when you have a NOC, that NOC might be staffed with like hundreds of people or thousands of people. What we have done is, kind of blown that process up and kind of reinvented it so that not only can we do it much more quickly, but we can also do it much more cost effectively. Next slide. So rather than talk about technology, I'll kind of just summarize what's the value that we offer to our customers. So number one, convenience. We are a one-stop shop. You come to us, you tell us you have a problem, we'll take care of it. And I'd say, for 95% of our customers, we go into not a greenfield environment, but an environment where there's a lot of stuff and there's a lot of stuff working and they have apps working and services working. And our assurance to them is we will fix the parts that need fixing and leave everything else alone. And when we leave, those broken parts are working. Second, and I've touched on this a couple of times, so I won't belabor the point, the service is highly reliable. Third, and this is where a lot of our innovation has gone in, we believe that we are able to essentially cut total ownership costs of a wireless system by a factor of 4 relative to legacy deployments. And a lot of that comes from innovation. Claus, you had an interesting comment that to be a NaaS provider, you have to know a lot about operations. And, the first thing that anybody that's, kind of run any kind of infrastructure will tell you is that if you have a remote site, if you have one visit, just one visit to that remote site, essentially that kind of, is incredibly expensive. And what we hear from a lot of our customers is, hey, something goes down every week, right? So what we focused on doing is, building up the capability so that we can run a lot of these remote facilities with almost zero human involvement. Day over day, week over week, month over month. We've had customers who've been deployed for years now and in a variety of remote locations. And a lot of that cost savings comes from the automation and the tooling that we've built up. And then finally, security is a table stakes. We do a lot of the same things that I would describe as being industry standard in terms of making sure that for our environment that these systems cannot be broken into. And a lot of that, boils down to regular audits, pen testing and techniques like that. And then finally, we talked about this before. We have designed a solution which can be deployed very quickly. So our goal is, if we have customers who have problems, that we are able to light up their facilities and get the service up and running very quickly, so that in terms of their digital transformation, in terms of the return on investment, that we can get them to a point where, from that overall digital transformation perspective, they can get that return on investment in 3 months or 4 months or 6 months, but substantially less than 1 year. So I'll stop here, Claus. Happy to answer questions.
Wow, super impressive. I mean, if it's 75% or a 1/4 of the normal TCO, it's a no-brainer, Partho, right? Pretty much.
It is, and one of the first conversations that we have with our customers, and it's an eye opener, is we take them through the journey of what it is to, for example, in a typical warehouse with legacy vendor gear,
Yeah.
what it takes, what are all the costs, and obviously product costs are kind of one of the elements, but what does it take to do upgrades, to do audits, to do site surveys on a regular basis, to perform, to kind of keep all of that up and running. And like I said, it's usually an eye opener, because for many of them, they've never seen that kind of analysis. A lot of the costs are hidden, or they may be across different budgets.
Yeah, for sure. So where are you now? You've been operating for how long?
This is our third year of operation. So we've been very secretive, kind of, heads down. You won't find much marketing literature about us. So we have, for us, in terms of size of deployments, each one is substantial. I talked about, for example, the mountain campus, which is about 1,000 acres. On the average, I'd say most of our deployments are a few million square feet. So that kind of gives you an, kind of idea of the size. And with somewhere of the order of 500 to 1,000 devices actively using the network.
I mean, this is super interesting. I mean, one of the things that struck me is that these verticals or segments that you're in, these industrial locations and so on, not necessarily high tech, right? A shipyard, water treatment plant, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that's also a challenge, right? To go in there and say, we're going to get you up to speed on, as you said, digital transformation, right?
I think, what I've found there is that you have a lot of very intelligent people. The people that run the ops team are actually quite technical. But I think that what they don't always have is awareness of infrastructure, networking, security, computing. And so when a solution needs to be stitched together, kind of pulling all those pieces together and getting it done, the enterprise often doesn't have that expertise. And so they need to outsource it to a partner. And they struggle with that. And so it takes them 4 or 5 years to kind of, stitch together a solution.
Right.
And we find that providing fully integrated solution really helps with that, because they are then able to very quickly realize the return on the investment. And seeing is believing, right? So if they can see that change happen quickly, they end up being our greatest advocates in terms of then introducing us to other customers.
Right. So the other really interesting thing you said, I think, is that you mentioned when you went through the process, I mean, the timeline, you said this is something somebody like Verizon would do, right? And I mean, I'm curious, do you see those types of service providers, not necessarily of that size, but MSPs and so on, as your competitor in this case? Because I mean, it can be obviously the own IT departments doing all this stuff and so on, but it can also be, as you mentioned, large service providers with, taking care of these types of deployments. I mean, how do you view that? Is that your main competitor?
They're not competitors today, because I would say that a lot of our buyers are mid-market enterprises,
right.
And they're organizations that wouldn't get the attention from an AT&T or Verizon. But what I truly believe is that technology changes how people think.
Oh, sure.
So I really think that in 4 years or 5 years or 6 years, you'll find that AT&T and Verizon, just like they've done with cloud today, will be kind of aggressively adopting these changes. So I will freely give credit to folks at AWS and GCP who showed us the way, right? The principles that they use to build cloud infrastructure are the same principles that we're using to build a lot of this type of infrastructure in terms of cheap hardware, redundancy, smart software that kind of manages how to turn workloads around. And I think that in the future, you'll see AT&T and Verizon and others essentially, kind of partnering with companies like us, adopting some of these technologies.
Yeah, fantastic. You're doing pioneering work, no question about it. So it's fascinating to see. Thank you so much, Partho. We're going to go to the next presentation. We'll bring you back for the Q&A. Lots of things to talk about. So let's go to Tim Dyer. And Tim Dyer is of CommScope Ruckus. And of course, CommScope Ruckus, not only a NaaS provider, quite a extremely well-known, I would say, provider of Wi-Fi and networking solutions. Tim, welcome. Good to see you. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Klaus. I wonder what else is there to say? mean, they cover things so nicely. I do want to thank Roy for setting up the backboard quite well. I think context is very important in everything we do. I think that not all things are created equal. I think that you get what you pay for in some regards. So I'm going to step through our vision here at Ruckus and at CommScope. If you go on to the next slide. That vision is, as Roy had articulated, a lot of folks are looking at the CNaaS space, and it's not just in the context of Wi-Fi or managed Wi-Fi. They have, as Partho said, lots of outdoor applications, may be better suited for CBRS applications or for even licensed spectrum. And we have a belief that we'll bring all of these together under one umbrella, and that umbrella is within our NICS, our Networking Intelligence Cellular and Security segment here at CommScope. So we have brought these all under the same umbrella. We did it about 2 years ago, and I'll talk about how we illustrate and how we manage this environment. If we go on to the next slide. Again, I think context is quite important. Some of the trends that are going on in the industry are important as it relates to providing a CNaaS service to customers. When you look at some of the things that are going on now, obviously AI front and center, I'll talk more about that. Also the introduction of IoT, the introduction of open standards, even in the Wi-Fi space, as well as environmental considerations and concerns all affect the enterprise. And those enterprises want to take them all into consideration as they outsource their network. Next, please. Another thing to consider, and also trending here in a big way, is Wi-Fi 7. And, we use this term, we've been around, Ruckus has been around for 20 years, and roughly 10 billion devices have been connected in that first 20 years. We anticipate another 10 billion devices being connected within the next 10 years. And we believe that one of the trends that's going to be quite significant is Wi-Fi 7. And you might ask yourself why. And if we go on to the next slide. It's for some of the obvious reasons: low latency, reliability, speed. But really, and Partho talked about this too, as well as Jayesh. What are the outcomes that people want to achieve? So when you look at latency and reliability and speed, what's really motivating that? And what's really motivating that, AR, VR, and in industrial and manufacturing use cases, video conferencing explosion, social gaming, streaming, and then IoT, all of those combined are creating kind of the perfect storm that's driving us down the path to next generation technology such as Wi-Fi 7. Next slide, please. Back to context, I'm responsible for a few things here at CommScope Ruckus. And one of the things I'm responsible for is our vertical markets initiatives. And a lot of people don't realize Ruckus is relatively small in the carpeted enterprise space. When I say relatively small, 5-6% market share holder. However, when we get into hospitality, multifamily environments, education, large public venues, we're a 20 to 23 market percent market share holder in some of those markets. And as I put together this deck, I also realized one of the things that was missing here was, and I don't know who was, someone touched on it, but the SMB space, so small, medium business space, which is actually quite strong for CNaaS right now. We're seeing a lot of people that want to incorporate and adopt early technology. We have a 3,500 site deployment going on for Wi-Fi 7 today. So first 4 sites are going in, but it's underway already. We have another municipality deploying roughly 2,600 locations, all CNaaS based. So it's pretty exciting. And for these variety of markets, we use our service provider partners to infiltrate each one of these market verticals. And some of the partners that we have, I won't name names, but two of the largest MNOs in the United States, the largest MSOs in the United States, actually take white label services from us. So up to about 6 months ago, 7 months ago, I also ran our managed services group, where we had 43,000 networks under management, very much in a CNaaS type model. But we've extended our CNaaS offer through our existing channels. We have, depends on the day, between 2,000 and 10,000 resale partners that we want to extend those services through. And we use this as the nucleus or the core to do that, or we use their services. And I'll talk about how we accomplish that in a minute. Next slide, please. Obviously, I said that all technology is not created equally, and you get what you pay for. We're quite fortunate here with 20 years of experience in the Wi-Fi arena, with 35 years in the licensed spectrum arena, and then another 10 years in unlicensed for private networks. We have quite a bit of experience on the hardware side of this. We also, a couple of years ago, introduced Ruckus One, which is our architecture, where we're collecting all of this information from a variety of platforms, and we're actually using AI to apply technology on top of those environments that allow us to do things in real time. So radio resource management is a great example, where thinking of resource management in three-dimensional space can't be done by humans anymore. The number of devices we have, one of our SP partners has roughly 1 million access points deployed. 1 million. When you think about what it takes to manage an environment like that, you just can't do these things on a manual basis any longer. And it's yet another reason why enterprises are looking to outsource. Next slide, please. Here's a different slice of it. We actually are bringing everything, Wi-Fi, IoT, cellular, security, analytics, into this Ruckus One architecture. And it's all homegrown. We've been developing, as I said, for the last couple of years. And now we've gotten to the point where we are creating and curating for our vertical markets, persona-based slices of this. So I could have a service provider extending a reach to a customer, and that customer could be an engineer. He could be a property manager. He could be a variety of different personas, and we're actually giving them a slice and an introduction to what they need to see in those environments. And we do that through the context also as being a component of our CNaaS offer. Next slide, please. And somebody was talking about this earlier. It's probably Roy. When you look at automation, you have to be a user of your technology as well. And so we are a user of our technology, so much so that we now can apply predictive analysis to what's going on in these network environments where we white label services. We can then even model what's going to happen, what if scenarios. We can fix these environments quickly, because that's what really one of the many things that matters to the end user customer is quick resolution of their problem. Next slide, please. And I know I have decks where we can talk about CNaaS only, and this really is to the heart of NaaS. What do the enterprises prioritize, and what do I prioritize? Obviously, I want to be able to resolve their problems quickly. I want to offload their operations and let them do what they do. If they build cars, let them go build cars, and I'll take care of their network. But I'm going to build the best, fastest network available for them that actually is germane to their business requirements. Roy talked about some of the metrics as we move forward. I think this is actually that 61% is probably from IDC. So there's a variety of great sources also available, AvidThink being one, of course, for general information around NaaS and its adoption rates. Next slide. As the former GM for our managed services group, no slide deck would be complete without this. So here, these are the services, and I think Partho and Jayesh both talked a little bit to this. But when you look at what you're providing as a managed service or to a managed service, it can be everything. Which piece parts of this do I want? And I often use this slide with our SP and our MSP partners to say, what do you want to do? What do you want us to do? Everything from design services to deployment services, fulfillment. Obviously, being a manufacturer of software and hardware allows us to be our own fulfillment agent, but we also have our channel partners that may fulfill a variety of these roles. So you want to be able to pick this thing apart or provide it holistically, and we do both. So it makes us quite unique. And by the way, we do both for Wi-Fi, for licensed and unlicensed cellular applications. And then lastly, next slide. Ultimately, people want to press an easy button. So the enterprise wants one check. They want to write an OPEX. They want to write a check on a subscription basis. They don't want to deal with any of the trouble calls. They want an easy screen to look at and just tells them green is everything good, or red something's down, or yellow I've got a potential problem. And they literally want us to turnkey and outsource all of that for them. And we have the ability to do that. I'll just close by saying I've been in networking for a long time, and networks have gotten very complex. AI has put this on its ear, and the inability to manually operate these networks is the day that we live in today. So automation, outsource, ease of management, and that presentation layer are all critically important. And we believe that we've got an excellent solution in that space. Thanks so much.
Great presentation. Thank you so much, Tim. If you were to characterize how you differ or are similar to some of these specialized NaaS providers, how would you do that? Because it seems to me that in some ways it's similar, but maybe with other ways of slicing it.
Certainly, yeah. So I guess what I would say is we make all of our own tech, and I have the benefit of 20 years and a huge installed base of customers and partners to draw from. So I not only, I'm kicking back over $100 million a year in R&D to my bottom line, but I'm doing it with MSPs and SPs with their perspective in mind. And we basically, and I say this I've only been here 2.5 years, so this is a gross use of we, but Ruckus really embarked down a path years ago where they enabled MSPs to provide CNaaS. And they've done it for years. And yes, so it's been outsourced Wi-Fi services by these MSPs enabled by the underlying technology of Ruckus. And that's just the maturity of it has just grown. And now the advent of AI just makes the job much easier for us as well as our partners.
Very good. Thank you so much. And we're going to bring everybody back for the panel in just a second. But before we do that, I just want to bring on Bob Grosz from WorldVue, because I want to give Bob a chance, first of all, to introduce WorldVue for those who may not know you. The brand is still fairly recent, right, Bob? And maybe just give us your initial thoughts on what you've heard, because obviously you've been listening, I'm sure, intently, and I know you have a lot of interest in this subject. So, Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Claus. So WorldVue has been around for about 50 years. Our focus is providing technology to hospitality, mainly around the converged IP network. So we do everything that a converged IP network offers, including Wi-Fi, including in-room entertainment, the TV services, and then things like the common area camera systems and everything else that the beauty of a converged IP network can deliver. We're currently in about 8,000 hotels. We do have a focus in the United States, but we recently opened offices throughout the world. So we are a global company now. And some of our largest customers are brands, hotel brands, Marriott, Hilton, IHG, etc. So, that we're deep in the hotel space, and we're deep in the network technology space. Mm-hmm. I've spoken at a couple of your conferences. If you recall back in Toronto, I very much took a contrarian approach to the network as a service model, and I did that primarily because most businesses, especially real estate businesses, focus on EBITDA, NOI as a indicator of value. So it's always a multiple of EBITDA, a multiple of NOI, and they capitalize that, and that's how they establish the value of their property. And I thought that the network as a service business, because there's an OpEx component, and sometimes that OpEx component is pretty good, kind of worked against the EBITDA model and against the NOI model. And what I've seen after I've explored and kind of been open-minded about this is that the connectivity aspect of a campus venue has become so mission critical, and to deploy good connectivity requires certain criteria from the venue owner and the operator. Things like a deep expertise of networking technology, things like the ability to focus on the network as a true asset, which means as an owner of an asset, you have to be prepared to invest in maintenance, spend money on maintenance, spend money on upgrades, constantly evolve the network and keep that network up over a period of time. So it's not a set it and forget it type thing. It's something that constantly needs management and maintenance, and most importantly, investment. And then the third thing is that the capital markets are fluid and always changing, whether it be the interest rate environment or the liquidity environment. Gaining access to capital has become more difficult recently. And most property or venue owners look at capital in terms of things like making sure that the life safety systems are in place, making sure that the property aesthetic is great, and looking at acquiring new land and building new buildings. So the investment from a capital standpoint in networking technology can sometimes get lost amongst those things, which leads me to kind of have a transformed vision of the campus network as a service as something that does have a seat at the table and can be a very important component to seeing networks evolve and the outcomes, which is great connectivity, reliable connectivity, secure connectivity, continually be delivered. And perhaps that a network owner or a service integrator like WorldVue, like these other great companies, should really be in the business of maintaining the asset and really focused on delivering it as an outcome-based service, as opposed to just selling hardware and selling infrastructure and then having a small kind of maintenance management contract. I think maybe there's a better role for us to turn to the network as a service model. And that's what I heard with other presenters, and that's what I see in the marketplace. So that's kind of what we're talking about right now.
No, fantastic. So let's bring everybody back on. And so you foresee, Bob, that this type of model will be part of your portfolio in the future, or perhaps even near future?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So welcome back, everybody. Thank you for great presentations. I think all of them were fabulous, and I'm learning a lot about this segment, which is super sophisticated, by the way, as we saw through the presentations. So I thank you for that. So lots of questions, but for the specialized folks out there that you guys are, for the most part, as I understand it, essentially designing and building your own infrastructure, APs and so forth, right? And switches presumably and so on, to actually deliver these networks. I mean, how do you feel that you can, on the technology side, compete with some of these very large enterprise networking providers, needing to, because you need to provide, at least the same level of technology as them, right, in order to be competitive? Is that not generally true, or does anybody want to take that one?
Well, I'll go first. Look, I've been working on Wi-Fi since I think 1999, and so I've kind of seen everything come along. And I feel like essentially what's happened in the last 8 or 9 or 10 years is that the hardware platforms are generally standardized. So, for example, with Wi-Fi, we use EdgeCore. We've been working closely with EdgeCore Acton. Even when I was in Cumulus is now part of NVIDIA. And we find that in terms of the way these platforms are built, a lot of the innovation is done by the silicon provider. And then once these platforms are built out in Asia, just in terms of hardware capabilities, I don't think there's that much to kind of differentiate between the various OEM platforms. But on the other hand, what has happened is, because of in the Wi-Fi world, as well as in the 3GPP world, because of the way in which interfaces have been opened up, you're now able to do a lot of clever things without having to kind of go design antennas and kind of all the low level things. Worry about noise budget for the LNA and kind of PA linearity aspects and things like that, right? That's sort of like almost commoditized. All the platforms, I'd say, are within like 2, 3, 4% of each other. I mean, there's exceptions if you build like really high power outdoor solutions. There's still innovation that's going on there, but broadly there isn't. So we feel, Klaus, that in terms of matching up, we match up very well because the hardware platforms are generally standardized. And we actually think that with a lot of OEMs, they've got trapped in this cycle of having to continue to add features because features are what get monetized. And I think that NaaS is refreshing in that perspective, in that your customers don't care about features; they just care about what level of service you provide and how much you kind of sell it to them for. So it's almost like the level of innovation that you're able to do in software. And a lot of the speakers talked about AI, which I haven't used the word, but I would say that that's a cornerstone of all of the services that we are providing. Right? We are all like leveraging that to the hilt, and I think that that's an area of kind of where the OEMs may be a little bit behind.
Right, but we're also talking about competing potentially against very large enterprise networking providers that have very deep pockets to develop AI, right? So,
well, if I could add to that, I think that the network as a service model is really a commercial model first and foremost. I mean, I'm very open to doing a model like this with an open Wi-Fi type platform versus or a Ruckus platform or anything else. Right. I think it's just a matter of kind of what kind of fuel you want to put in the car and what kind of vehicle you want to drive, but the road's still open either way. Right. So
actually, there was a question came in for you. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Who wants to comment? Yeah, go ahead, Jayesh.
First of all, I totally agree with everything Partho said about this, because the value in the silicon. So it's we all use Broadcom, Qualcomm, all of these chips that really do all the clever stuff. And so I think although some of the larger vendors can claim some differentiation, it's minimal, right, in terms of what we're doing, because it's from that perspective. We can also, from a software perspective, we can leverage latest development, open source, and everything to reduce our cost as well. So now we are passing all of this off first to the customer. The second thing is the days are gone when you look at all the feeds and speeds of a particular technology, right? As I say, what people are looking for is outcome. So when you go to a particular place, you never say whose access point is up there in the ceiling. All you're interested in is, when I connect, am I getting good performance, right? Nobody ever cares whether it's a Meraki or a Ruckus access point. And the other important thing you mentioned about AI and why it's going to be different and why the new vendors have an advantage is that today what you have is a typical network is built with disparate network equipment, right? So you'll have let's say a Meraki access point, you could get a extreme switch, you could have somebody else's a firewall, right? Now, for anybody to troubleshoot that, they need to have all this information in a way they can manage that. So it's collecting the relevant information from the network to troubleshoot and optimize, right? Now, all of these companies have their own pretty dashboards and alerts and everything, but what the IT guy doesn't want to deal with all of this stuff. He just wants it. So the new vendors can really, if they're providing a lot of this, their own capabilities and using standard off-the-shelf hardware and ODM hardware, you're now significantly reducing the complexity of managing that equipment and adding value at the AI level.
Mm-hmm. Tim, do you have any comments to add to this discussion? I mean, you guys are in a strong position because you're already developing based on AI and so on and so forth very successfully and so on. Is it easier for you to compete than do you think?
Well, I'd say yes. Yes, it is. And it's because I agree with what Bob said. I disagree with a little bit of what Jayesh said, and I'd largely agree with Partho. As I said earlier, you do get what you pay for, and we've had 20 years of technology behind things like Beamflex, and you can make an argument that that's not relevant anymore, but anybody that wants to go out back and do a side-by-side comparison, I welcome that. So that I guess I'd start with that. And I'd say that this is a huge market. I really appreciate and admire what the guys over at Join have done. You know, they started on the commercial real estate vent. I think that it's kind of a brilliant tactic they took.
Mhm.
And Partho, we've talked to Partho about being an outsourced partner to help us scale our own business. So what he has done, we really appreciate. And then, of course, Bob's in a space that we live and breathe this space for hospitality. And we are not immune to price pressure. You know, you can talk about outcome being the same. You can talk about ROI, NOI being the, you know, and EBITDA being the requisite KPIs that people are measured by. So we're not immune to that. We have to build low dollar, low scale, high volume APs for the hospitality environment as an example of things that we have to do. But we do have that luxury of scaling up and scaling down our overall solution set. And then, as I said, you layer on AI to that. And to Jayesh's point, yes, I think it's critically important to actually manage third parties as well. But I also want to provide a slice to each one of the constituents or those personas that are looking at my technology KPIs.
All right. Before we run out of time, we did get some comments or some questions from our viewers that I think we should dive into. So this one is for Roy. How does campus NaaS relate to what the carriers call NaaS?
So yeah, so there is we actually have a carrier NaaS report coming out.
Okay.
Ironically.
Ironically.
Yeah, so NaaS as a term actually first was more popular on the carrier side, right? Network as a service was more sort of a carrier sort of links, right? So the point-to-point and the on-demand, and it became very popular during the SDN early days in the 2011, 2012, right? Network as a service, on-demand. So that was the trend. But it is a different service. I mean, fundamentally, there are similarities in terms of, you know, it's sort of the on-demand consumable type sort of a feeling that you get with that service. But that's just the conception of it. But from a business model standpoint, you know, we talked back in the SDN days, network as a service. Let me calendar bandwidth, right? Let me turn up bandwidth in the night so I can do backups. Let me create a point-to-point link from this data center to that data center just for the purposes of transferring a large-scale data set. So that was popularized back in the sort of early 2010s, and now it's coming back. I think, you know, network as a service. There are many definitions of it, but that's why the report is called Campus NaaS, to differentiate from the other report, which is called Carrier NaaS, right? But that's the difference.
So let's cover a couple of more questions from our audience. Here's one for Bob. Bob, how do you see the value or promise of tip open LAN? It says, I don't know if they mean tip open Wi-Fi, tip open LAN. There is such a thing as tip open LAN now. I think
There is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that question was to me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's like I said before, I think the open world, LAN, Wi-Fi, what have you, the TIPS program really is interesting because it does disaggregate the hardware from the software. It allows you to do some interesting things on the software side to integrate with a specific use case, kind of give you the features that you want, that you need to operate to a specific client base. And, you know, we can move quickly with that. And that's very attractive, especially after we all survived the supply chain issues that everyone had back a few years ago. Those are still always on our mind, and the wounds are still healing. And I think that there's a desire to have more control over our ultimate outcomes. And maybe this open Wi-Fi, open LAN thing can help us do that. I think we are very active in that space and watching that space. But I'll go back to kind of what I said before. There are still great, very highly designed, highly engineered platforms out there that do offer a robust product set in more of a turnkey-like environment. So they both have seats at the table.
Right, very good answer. So here's one for Partho. Can you offer a fixed monthly charge, or does it depend on their cellular usage? I'm not sure what he means exactly, but this is the question. Is there a separate bill to the telecom carrier in the service that you offer?
Yeah, good question. So look, I mean, I think Roy did a great job of kind of, explaining the financial models and, kind of how
Hmm.
NaaS is supposed to be. As a startup, the first conversation that we have with anyone is, look, if you want to, have a service, if you want to pay all the cash up front, you can do so. If you want to pay it out over time, you can do so. We're completely flexible because look, at the end of the day, anyone that's worked with like a financial services company, like a bank and so on, realize this is all just financial engineering, right? So we've set up a structure internally where it's like money is money, doesn't matter how you pay it. So what we focus on, Klaus, from a pricing standpoint, is to make sure that uh, you know as many of the services that we employ, we try to roll that into our offering, the goal being to reduce complexity. I mean, with NaaS, there was one perspective. We talked about finance, we talked about uh, kind of technology, but I think there's one really basic reason why NaaS is going to happen. So, I'm just dating myself, but I learned networking in the 1990s. It was very cool, very sexy. Guess what? You go to a kid today and they say networking, it's pipes, it's something. No one wants to do this stuff anymore. And it's damn complicated. And like everyone said, it's critical. That's what your enterprise runs on, even like the hospitality things, as Bob was saying, right? So who's gonna do all this work, right? So we better well invent the technology and deploy it. And that's what's gonna make that successful.
Partho, I still think networking's sexy, just for the record.
Okay, buddy.
Great. Great. It is for us anyway. So, but anyway, I wanted to say, I want to ask you, the multi-million-dollar or maybe billion-dollar question. I mean, is Campus NaaS going to chew a bite out of the established markets of some of the networking giants? That's my first question. But actually, let me just qualify that with a comment. In a market that is under pressure, a number of analysts have mentioned that this is really a bright spot. This is a growth market. While a lot of, as we know, I mean, enterprise Wi-Fi is under pressure, right? So what's going to happen? Are you guys going to take a chunk out of the business of the big ones, Jayesh and Partho?
Yeah, so I think maybe a good analogy here might serve the point here. So think about in the days before Salesforce came about with their SaaS model, you had Microsoft and Oracle selling their CRM stuff and with all feature riches, but you had the resellers saying, "I'll host your server, I'll add the software and all this sort of stuff," right? And everybody in the middle had to take this slice. And initially, I mean, the CRM SaaS was a little slow to take up, but then it just totally blew it out of the water, right? Whereby now the CRM provides everything. So in fact, some of the resellers to change their model because they could no longer provide value by saying, "I'm going to host this application on this servers," and do all of that. And right now, NaaS is going to the same thing, right? Exactly the same thing, whereby the new entrants have a chance. And look where Salesforce is today, right? They're fundamentally changing the business model. For example, the traditional vendors, we have a NOC. We have an operating model where we operate the network and we have a NOC. None of the existing vendors have their own network operating center because that's supposed to be done by an MSP. So you're not developing the full vertical stack like a Salesforce did. They're saying, "I'm going to have a global infrastructure in the cloud." So the IT team doesn't even have to understand how many cores are running, where they're running, how they're running. All they want to make sure is the users are happy, and I don't ever want to deploy the software on by myself on my site. And I think is that analogy.
Roy, what do you think based on your research?
So I think, the overall market, as we know, right? IT grows by X% every year, right? Security grows by X%, networking grows by X%. That's just the reality of the total market. So the $35 billion envelope, will shift, will go up, will go down. It shifts a little bit based on the Wi-Fi, standards and, supply chain and all that. So that's the thing. So within that segment, there is the NaaS component of it, right? And that will shrink or grow based on sort of deployment models. So fundamentally, I think there's this one pie, and just how you slice the pie up, generally speaking. Now, the incumbents, the big players, all have NaaS offerings in various degrees. And then the report goes into some of the details around how they differ, right? So they're going to sit on both sides and play that game and watch. And then when one of these startups sitting here or outside threatens them too much, they'll just buy them and it comes in, and then they'll take care of it that way, right? And we know that's the pattern, right? That's how this system goes, and it's been like that for the last 2-3 decades. That's the reality.
You're probably
that's
Partho is already
expectation.
looking forward to that. When that
Yeah, I mean, we'll see some of these folks maybe next year. Maybe it's a little different company name, right? Who knows, right? I mean, but that's what I see as a reality. But as a model, I mean, I think Jayesh is right? That though application service providers, remember the ASPs and the Siebels and the SAPs, right? They all went away. Now there is one difference, and we do point this out in the report, which is that with campus NaaS in particular, unlike SaaS or IaaS or PaaS, those depend on the network being there. And there's a centralized point. You build a data center, you can reach it from anywhere. Campus NaaS is a little different. They have to come to your building, put hardware and assets, capital assets in your building, do the structured cabling, roll it all out in your location. Because, without the network, there is nothing. And so there is a slight difference in terms of the SaaS, IaaS, PaaS uptake and the NaaS uptake, especially as it pertains to campus NaaS. So there is a slight difference, and we need to be aware of that as we try to track the maturity of that market, right? There is a difference fundamentally.
Tim, as a large established vendor, how do you see this? It's I suppose business as usual for you guys to offer all of the above, right?
Correct. And Roy is absolutely right. So when we do a traditional, just a NaaS pitch, we distinguish between infrastructure as a service and then a full turnkey service. And that's our point of differentiation. And of course, we're maybe more fortunate than some, Jayesh, because we actually do have our own NOC, the US NOCs in Salt Lake City, and then we have them around the world. Yeah.
So, all right, very good. Bob, I'm going to give you the last question. Do you think the hospitality market might be ready for something like this? I mean, this is, by the way, a very well-established and, 20, 30-year-old market, right, for networking and so on, and somewhat conservative. But do you think part of it might be ready for something like CNaaS?
I think parts of the market are ready for something like this. Probably the independents and the smaller hotels. I think the big brands, it's going to be a while. It's going to be a long while, in fact, because they do set standards, and those standards are really cemented in that traditional model where the equipment is the equipment and the service is the service. And so I think part of the market, yes, part of the market, not yet.
Right. Gentlemen, what a great webinar. I'm so pleased with this because the input was fantastic, and some of the questions also actually from the audience was great, and the Q&A was fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on, to all of you, and enlightening us about this. And we're going to do this again for sure. So in the not too distant future. But for now, thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Okay, everyone, that is it for this special event. And thanks once again to our great speakers. Make sure you keep following us for more industry update live webinars, and not least lots more information on Wi-Fi World Congress Geneva coming up in September. Make your plans now. It is an amazing place to visit, and you get to mingle with the Wi-Fi leaders in that beautiful city. So our next live event is actually next week. Keep an eye out for that. We're going to be talking regulation for the unlicensed band with some of the foremost experts in that area. So that's going to be exciting. That is it for today. Also, thanks very much to my hardworking producer, Veronica Bukac, sitting right here next to me. See you next time. Thank you and goodbye.